Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. I am really excited to jump into this one with you.
Oh, yeah, me too. It is a fantastic topic today.
It really is. So, to start us off, I want you, the listener, to just imagine unlocking a heavy oak door to a private, glass-walled conference room at Harvard Medical School today.
The absolute pinnacle of modern medicine, right?
Exactly. You walk in, and sitting around this massive mahogany table are the absolute greatest minds in the entire history of human health.
Just a totally wild scenario to wrap our heads around.
Right. You have Hippocrates, the ancient Greek father of medicine, sitting right next to Dr. Weston Price, the legendary 1930s pioneer of nutritional anthropology.
And across from them is a modern Nobel laureate in cellular biology and expert in how cells regenerate.
Yeah, and then at the head of the table sits a contemporary, top-tier Harvard physician. He's representing the absolute peak of modern conventional medicine.
So you have all these titans in one room.
Exactly. And their one task, the only reason they have been pulled across time and space into this room, is to evaluate our current state of human health.
It is just a brilliant, highly provocative scenario. We are setting up a collision of completely different paradigms here.
Well, for sure.
You know, you have the ancient holistic philosopher, the globe-trotting nutritional detective, the modern microscopic biologist, and the contemporary data-driven practitioner, all forced to look at the exact same problem.
And that problem is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive. We are exploring a fascinating conceptual dialogue from Dr. Joe's Health Talk.
Often referred to as the patient revolution.
Right, the patient revolution, which stages this exact time-bending intervention. We're going to use this incredible thought experiment to understand a massive, glaring paradox in modern health.
The goal being to figure out the deep-seated flaws in symptomatic care, I assume.
Exactly. And to explore a huge paradigm shift toward what is known as functional medicine. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's look at the window of that Harvard conference room.
Right, what are they actually seeing?
Yeah, what are these historical titans observing when they look at our modern medical system?
Well, if they look at one window, they see the undisputed triumphs of the 21st century.
The really flashy stuff.
Exactly. They see functional MRI machines that can map the firing synapses of the human brain in real time.
Which is basically sci-fi to someone like Hippocrates.
Oh, literally magic. They see robotic surgery bays where a doctor can remove a tumor with microscopic precision using a joystick. They see trauma bays that can literally bring a victim of a catastrophic car crash back from the brink of death.
We are, without a doubt, the best in human history at putting humans back together after a trauma.
A level of acute mechanical intervention that is just unparalleled.
But, and this is big what? Then they look out the other window. They look at the waiting rooms.
Yeah, and that is where the illusion of total victory just shatters completely.
Because sitting in those waiting rooms are ever-increasing, staggering lines of patients.
People suffering from chronic, lingering systemic illnesses.
Right, we are talking about the explosion of type 2 diabetes, the rampant spread of hypertension.
The baffling exponential rise of autoimmune diseases and chronic fatigue.
It's everywhere. The paradox they're staring at is this. Modern medicine has achieved spectacular victories in acute care, yet despite billions of dollars in research,
And the most advanced technology ever conceived.
we are collectively getting sicker and sicker with chronic degenerative diseases. We can transplant a beating human heart from one chest to another.
Which is miraculous.
It is, but we cannot seem to stop tens of millions of people from developing systemic inflammation that slowly destroys their joints, their blood vessels, and their brains.
And this glaring paradox is what triggers the first major confrontation in our scenario.
Right. So the modern Harvard physician, let's just call him Dr. Smith for our discussion today.
Okay, Dr. Smith.
He stands up at the head of the table. And he is defensive, but proud. He points to the modern arsenal.
Naturally, he wants to defend his life's work.
Exactly. He specifically highlights pharmaceutical marvels, like statins for lowering cholesterol and beta blockers for controlling high blood pressure. He presents these as the ultimate victories over human biology.
And, well, from the perspective of a modern, data-driven practitioner, those drugs are victories.
How so?
Think about the biochemistry involved. A statin, for example, goes into the liver and specifically inhibits an enzyme called HMG-CoA reductase.
Okay, wow, big words. What does that do?
It plays a central role in the production of cholesterol. It is a highly targeted, engineered chemical intervention that reliably alters a biomarker in the human bloodstream.
So Dr. Smith looks at a spreadsheet, sees the cholesterol number drop from the red zone to the green zone, and views that as a totally solved problem.
Exactly. The dashboard light is off.
But Hippocrates, sitting right across the table, looks at that exact same spreadsheet and he doesn't see a victory at all.
No, he really doesn't.
In our scenario, the father of medicine leans forward and drops an incredibly biting critique. He looks at the statins and the blood pressure pills and tells the modern doctor that he is merely trimming the leaves of the disease tree.
Trimming the leaves. I love that phrasing. It immediately reframes the entire philosophy of care.
It challenges the definition of what it actually means to heal someone.
Totally.
Right.
Mm.
But I have to jump in here and play devil's advocate for a second, both for Dr. Smith and for you listening right now.
Go for it.
Because, I mean, if my blood pressure is 180 over 110, I am a walking stroke risk. Taking a pill that artificially forces my blood vessels to dilate and lowers that pressure might literally save my life tonight.
It absolutely might.
Isn't trimming the leaves better than just letting the whole tree burn down? Like, let's use an analogy. If my house is actively on fire, I want the fire department kicking down my door with their hoses immediately.
Of course you do.
And modern medicine, as we established, is the greatest fire department in the history of the world.
It is. But let's push that fire department analogy further, because it reveals exactly what Hippocrates is getting at here.
Okay, let's push it.
Yes. If the house is ablaze, if you are having a myocardial infarction right now, you need the hoses. You need the acute intervention.
Right.
But modern medicine isn't just ignoring the arsonist who set the fire.
Oh, wow.
It is actively watching the homeowner build a new house out of dry kindling, soaking it in gasoline, and then patting itself on the back for selling the homeowner a slightly better fire extinguisher.
That is a brutal image, but so accurate.
Right.
Hippocrates isn't denying the efficacy of the drug. He is questioning the absurdity of the strategy.
Exactly. He is asking why the tree is diseased in the first place, rather than just inventing a sharper pair of shears.
To get to the root of it, Hippocrates asks the modern doctor a highly uncomfortable question. He asks, do you ever actually ask your patients if they are willing to give up the very things that made them sick to begin with?
Imagine dropping that question into a modern clinical setting today.
It would cause chaos. A doctor is seeing 20, maybe 30 patients a day, functioning in these brutal 15-minute increments dictated by insurance billing codes.
Yeah, 15 minutes if you're lucky.
Right. Did you ask them to give up what made them sick? I mean, there is no billing code for a systemic lifestyle interrogation.
And that constraint, that time and financial pressure, is what transforms medicine from the art of holistic healing into a perpetual symptom management business.
A business, right.
Because if you only trim the diseased leaves, the underlying rot in the roots remains. The tree will inevitably produce more diseased leaves.
So the patient will always need to come back for another trimming.
Exactly. You have inadvertently engineered a permanent customer.
Think about the psychological trap this creates for you, the patient. Let's say you go to the clinic. Your blood pressure is dangerously high, your doctor seems concerned, and you feel a spike of anxiety.
Very common scenario.
The doctor hands you a prescription. You take the pill every morning. A month later, you go back, they put the cuff on your arm, and the machine beeps. 120 over 80. Normal. What is your immediate psychological response?
Complete relief, obviously. The dashboard indicator light has turned off, so you assume the engine is running perfectly.
But the engine is still melting down. You just put a piece of black tape over the check engine light.
That's a great way to put it.
The pill artificially forced the blood vessels to relax, but it did absolutely nothing to address why they were constricted and stiff in the first place.
Was it chronic stress? Was it a diet packed with refined sugars that are damaging the endothelial lining of the arteries?
By giving you that perfect 120 over 80 reading, the medication actually provides a false sense of security.
It implicitly gives you permission to go right back to the drive-thru.
To keep living the exact lifestyle that caused the hypertension to begin with.
And this reliance on symptomatic medication creates an entire demographic that functional practitioners call the chronically managed.
The chronically managed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are individuals tethered to a pharmaceutical cogwheel. They aren't moving toward vitality or health. They are simply managing their biological decline through escalating chemical interventions.
It's a snowball effect. You start with one pill for blood pressure.
Then the diuretic depletes your potassium, so you need a supplement for that.
And the root inflammation eventually impacts your blood sugar, so you add metformin. It is a cascade of leaf trimming.
A cascade of leaf trimming that perfectly captures the visual of a doctor caught between giant grinding gear wheels of the medical industry.
You know, the doctor isn't malicious. Dr. Smith genuinely wants to help.
Absolutely. They take an oath to help.
But he is trapped in a system where the entire business model, from the pharmaceutical reps to the insurance payouts, is fundamentally at odds with true root cause healing.
If your entire industry is built on manufacturing and selling leaf trimmers, the absolute last thing you want to do is pull the disease tree out by its roots.
Which forces the conversation in our conference room to pivot. If modern medicine is out in the yard obsessively trimming the leaves, we logically must examine the soil.
We have to figure out what is rotting the roots of human health.
And this brings Dr. Weston Price into the spotlight. For anyone unfamiliar with Dr. Price, his inclusion in this scenario completely shifts the paradigm.
It really does. Back in the 1930s, Dr. Price was a highly respected dentist and researcher.
But instead of just looking at teeth in an Ohio clinic, he decided to travel the globe.
Right. He spent years studying isolated primitive tribes and communities who had zero access to modern civilization.
No modern processed food, no modern medicine.
He was essentially conducting a massive anthropological study on human vitality before the dawn of industrialized agriculture.
Where'd he go?
He traveled everywhere, to isolated villages in the Swiss Alps, to traditional Gaelic communities in the Outer Hebrides, to the Maasai in Africa, and to indigenous populations in the Americas and Australia.
And what he found completely shattered the modern assumptions about aging and disease.
Totally shattered them.
These populations didn't have access to Harvard Medical School, yet they exhibited a level of physical robustness that was just astounding.
They had broad, perfectly formed dental arches. No need for braces, no impacted wisdom teeth.
They had a near-total absence of tooth decay.
But more importantly, they had virtually zero instances of the chronic systemic diseases that are bankrupting our medical systems today.
No rampant heart disease, no epidemic of autoimmune disorders. It's wild.
Price meticulously documented all of this, too. He photographed their teeth, their bone structures, and cataloged their diets.
And his ultimate conclusion brings the hammer down on the root cause of our modern crisis.
What did he conclude?
The secret to their health wasn't genetics, and it certainly wasn't better pharmaceutical management. It was the fact that their diets were fiercely nutrient-dense and entirely devoid of refined, industrialized ingredients.
Whether it was the raw dairy and rye of the Swiss villagers or the organ meats and seafood of the indigenous populations, the common denominator was food in its whole natural state.
He points the finger directly at the advent of highly processed, industrialized food. He identifies the introduction of refined white flour, refined sugars, and processed vegetable oils as the literal poison in the soil.
And here is where the ancient wisdom perfectly dovetails with 20th century anthropology.
Yes, Hippocrates nods at Dr. Price and brings up his most enduring, legendary doctrine. All disease begins in the gut.
All disease begins in the gut. It is a staggering claim for a man to make thousands of years before the invention of the microscope.
He had no concept of the microbiome, yet he intuitively understood the physiological hierarchy of the body.
So let's actually break down the how and the why of this ancient doctrine, because this is where the biological mechanisms get really fascinating.
We hear gut health thrown around as a wellness buzzword all the time, but what is actually happening physically?
Right. Like when we eat a modern, heavily processed diet, the kind of food that comes in crinkly plastic wrappers, engineered for shelf life rather than human life.
How does that translate to a disease in, say, our joints or our brain?
To understand that, we have to look at the architecture of the human gut. The lining of your intestines, which separates the food you eat from your actual bloodstream, is incredibly fragile.
How fragile?
It is only one single cell thick.
Wow. One cell.
Imagine a microscopic wall made of individual bricks. Holding these bricks together are things called tight junctions.
Tight junctions. Got it.
Their job is to act as a highly intelligent security checkpoint. They allow microscopic, digested nutrients to pass into the blood while keeping out toxins, undigested food particles, and harmful bacteria.
It is the ultimate border control for the human body.
Exactly. But modern processed foods, specifically chemical emulsifiers, used to keep ingredients mixed, refined seed oils, and massive amounts of artificial sugar, they act almost like a corrosive solvent on that border wall.
So they are literally eating away at the wall.
Yes. They trigger the release of a protein called zonulin, which literally pries those tight junctions apart. The microscopic bricks separate.
And suddenly your border control has massive gaping holes in it. This is what we call leaky gut.
Yes, intestinal permeability. Once those holes open up, Undigested proteins and toxins that were supposed to stay safely inside the digestive tract spill directly into the bloodstream.
And the immune system does not like that.
Not at all. When your immune system sees these foreign particles floating in the blood, it sounds a massive systemic alarm. It triggers an aggressive inflammatory response to attack the invaders.
So the fire starts in the gut, but the smoke and the damage spread everywhere.
That's a great way to visualize it.
If that chronic low-grade immune alarm never shuts off because you're eating processed food 3 times a day, that systemic inflammation starts damaging healthy tissue.
If it attacks the joints, we call it rheumatoid arthritis.
If it damages the insulin receptors, we call it type 2 diabetes.
If it inflames the brain, we see brain fog or neurodegenerative issues.
The symptom manifests at the weakest link in your biological chain. But the root cause of the arsonist is the compromised gut lining caused by the industrialized diet.
Here's where it gets really interesting and a bit chilling, honestly. During this exchange between Price and Hippocrates, there is a profound distillation of this entire concept.
Yeah, the ancient physician says, if you don't eat food like medicine, you'll end up eating medicine like food.
I want you to let that sink in.
Look at our culture. We eat whatever is fastest, cheapest, and most heavily chemically engineered to hijack our taste buds. We treat food entirely as entertainment and convenience.
And then we literally have plastic pill organizer boxes on our kitchen counters with little compartments for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday to deal with the inevitable biological fallout.
We have normalized the idea that taking a handful of synthetic chemicals every single morning is just a standard, unavoidable part of getting older.
We view the pills as the primary defense against aging and the food as irrelevant background noise.
But wait, Dr. Smith is a Harvard-educated physician. He isn't going to just surrender to an ancient Greek and a 1930s dentist without a fight.
No, he's got a rebuttal lined up.
He pushes back with the ultimate modern defense. He says, hold on. What about genetics? We have mapped the human genome. We know that certain people carry genetic markers that heavily predispose them to heart disease or Alzheimer's.
He says you cannot possibly blame all of that on a leaky gut and eating a donut.
Right. My father had a heart attack at 50. His father had one at 50. My genes are my destiny, right?
It is the most common and deeply ingrained defense in modern medicine, biological determinism. The idea that your DNA is an inescapable blueprint.
But this is where the functional medicine paradigm completely upends the conventional view, utilizing the science of epigenetics.
Epigenetics, the study of how your behaviors and environment can cause changes that affect the expression of your genes.
So your genes don't change, but how your body reads them does.
Exactly. So how does functional medicine respond to Dr. Smith's defense? They use a very famous, very powerful analogy. In this paradigm, genetics merely load the gun.
But your lifestyle, your environment, and specifically the health of your gut microbiome, they pull the trigger.
Genetics load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. That completely shifts the power dynamic.
It fundamentally empowers the patient. Yes, you may have a strong genetic predisposition to cardiovascular disease.
Yeah.
You inherited a loaded weapon.
But if you maintain a pristine gut barrier, if you eat nutrient-dense whole foods, if you manage chronic stress so your cortisol isn't constantly spiking,
that gun never actually has to fire. The genetic code for the disease is never activated.
Dr. Smith's modern approach is to stare at the loaded gun, wait for the trigger to be pulled, and then try to invent a pharmaceutical net to catch the bullet in midair.
While functional medicine says, just keep your finger off the trigger.
It makes so much sense when you frame it like that.
Okay, so if Dr. Price is right, and our modern processed diet is pouring toxic waste onto the roots of the tree, and if Hippocrates is right, that the leaky gut is what pulls the trigger on our genetic predispositions.
How does the body ever recover?
Exactly. Is the damage permanent? If I have spent 20 years eating poorly, am I just doomed?
To answer that, we have to look past the soil. We have to zoom completely in, down to the microscopic cellular level.
And this brings us to the final member of our panel, the modern cellular biologist.
Enter Dr. Yoshinori Osumi, representing the cutting-edge science in our scenario, whom we'll refer to as Dr. Tanaka for the context of this panel.
His presence bridges the gap between ancient observation wisdom and modern verifiable biochemistry.
Dr. Tanaka represents a concept that actually won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2016.
The concept is called autophagy. Now, if we were talking about the body recovering from damage, we have to unpack what autophagy actually is.
Mechanistically, what is happening inside us?
The word autophagy literally translates from Greek to self-eating, which sounds slightly
It
terrifying.
does sound like a horror movie. But it is actually the most magnificent, elegant self-preservation system in the biological world.
Autophagy is the body's deeply conserved, built-in mechanism for cleaning out old, damaged cellular components and regenerating fresh, highly functional cells.
To make this mechanism crystal clear, let's step away from the medical jargon. A lot of times, people compare autophagy to a janitor sweeping up trash.
But that doesn't really explain how it works.
Mhm.
I prefer a different analogy.
Mm.
Imagine a massive, complex Lego castle.
Okay, I can picture that.
Over time, because people are playing with it, which represents the daily metabolic stress of just living, eating, and breathing, some of the Lego pieces get damaged. Some walls get weak, some pieces are put on backward.
That damage represents misfolded proteins, oxidized lipids, and old organelles inside your cells that are no longer functioning properly.
The cellular trash is heavily implicated in aging and diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
Exactly. Now, autophagy isn't a janitor that comes and throws the whole damaged Lego castle into the garbage. Autophagy is a highly advanced recycling plant.
When autophagy is activated, the body identifies the damaged Lego sections, dismantles them piece by piece, cleans the individual bricks,
Which are your amino acids.
and then uses those exact same recycled bricks to build a brand new, stronger, perfectly structured wall.
It is literal cellular rejuvenation from the inside out. It is a remarkable system.
But here's the critical conflict that Dr. Tanaka points out to the panel. This recycling plant does not run constantly.
It requires a very specific biological trigger to turn on.
What is the trigger?
Nutrient deprivation and a drop in cellular energy.
Okay, so fasting, basically.
Exactly. The body has nutrient sensors, primarily a pathway called mTOR, which senses when food is plentiful. When you eat, especially carbohydrates and proteins, mTOR tells the body, we have plenty of resources. Grow, build, store.
As long as MTR is active, the recycling plant autophagy is completely shut down.
Why scavenge for old parts when fresh deliveries are constantly arriving?
And here is the modern tragedy. In our current culture, we are eating from the moment we wake up until the moment we go to sleep.
We have breakfast, a mid-morning snack, a heavy lunch, an afternoon pick-me-up, dinner, and late-night snacks.
We are keeping the building open and the metabolic engines running 24/7. We keep MTOR constantly activated.
And if mTOR never turns off, the body never activates the opposing pathway, AMPK.
Which is the alarm system that turns on autophagy. Because we never experience nutrient scarcity, the recycling plant never gets the signal to power up.
So the damaged Lego pieces just keep piling up, the misfolded proteins accumulate, the cellular trash builds up, creating senescent cells.
What scientists call zombie cells.
Right, zombie cells that refuse to die and instead secrete inflammatory chemicals.
Dr. Tanaka's point is profound here. True healing comes from this internal self-cleaning mechanism. Yet the modern symptom management approach not only ignores this Nobel Prize-winning science, it actively suppresses it.
We throw artificial stimulants and chemical blockers at the body, totally disrupting this delicate cycle of growth and repair.
Dr. Tanaka is essentially telling Dr. Smith, you're trying to invent a drug to cure a disease that the body already knows how to cure if you would just get out of its way and let it clean itself.
And this realization forces the ultimate proposed solution of the deep dive. It demands a total paradigm shift toward functional medicine.
Let's define that shift clearly. Based on everything we've unpacked, functional medicine is the exact opposite of the symptom management business.
It is the relentless, inquisitive pursuit of the root cause. It demands that a practitioner shift their foundational question.
Instead of looking at a patient and asking what drug matches this symptom,
They must ask, why is this symptom occurring in the first place? Where is the biological interference?
it completely reframes the fundamental role of the doctor. In the conventional model, the doctor is the hero who dispenses a chemical fix. The power lies in the prescription pad.
But in the functional medicine model, the doctor steps down from that pedestal. The doctor becomes a facilitator of natural healing.
A facilitator, they become a medical detective.
Their job is to investigate the patient's entire ecosystem, their gut microbiome, their daily stress levels, their sleep architecture, their exposure to environmental toxins.
The doctor's role is to identify the roadblocks preventing the body's internal systems, like autophagy, from functioning and help the patient remove them.
Okay, this is all incredibly fascinating theory. We know the body has an internal recycling plant called autophagy.
We know that processed food, constant eating, and pharmaceutical band-aids stop this plant from running.
The ultimate practical question for you, the listener, is this. What are the daily actionable instructions to turn this miraculous healing system back on?
If I want to flip the switch at the recycling plant tonight, what exactly do I do? And for the answer, our thought experiment takes us right back to the beginning.
We go back to Hippocrates. It is the perfect closing arc. The most ancient voice in the room provides the most biologically sound, practical advice.
Hippocrates issues his ultimate prescriptions to Dr. Smith, and they are almost laughably simple compared to the complexity of a robotic surgery bay.
He says two things. Walking is man's best medicine, and everything in excess is opposed to nature.
To a modern ear, attuned to complex, multisyllabic treatment protocols and cutting-edge biohacks, hearing the father of Edison prescribe a walk sounds almost anticlimactic.
I know, the scenario actually leans into this humor. Hippocrates gives this incredibly blunt advice. If you are in a bad mood, go for a walk. If you're still in a bad mood, go for another walk.
It sounds like folksy wisdom. But let's look at the biological mechanisms behind that advice, because it perfectly activates everything we just discussed with Dr. Tanaka and autophagy.
Let's take the first part. Everything in excess is opposed to nature. What is the defining characteristic of modern life?
Excess. Specifically, an excess of highly caloric processed food and an excess of sedentary behavior.
We are constantly in a caloric surplus, sitting in temperature-controlled rooms.
Exactly. And that excess is what keeps the MTOR pathway perpetually activated. It shuts down the recycling plant.
By simply reducing excess, by practicing intermittent fasting, by stopping the constant snacking, by eating whole foods that don't artificially spike blood sugar, you create the mild biological stress, the nutrient scarcity required to wake up the AMPK pathway and initiate autophagy.
You are finally turning the lights off in the building so the cleaners can get to work. And then you add the second prescription, walking.
Why is walking so mechanistically powerful?
Walking is the ultimate form of hormetic stress.
Hormesis is a biological concept where a low dose of a stressor actually triggers a deeply beneficial adaptive response in the body.
When you engage in moderate, consistent movement like walking, you slightly deplete the glycogen and the stored sugar in your muscles.
This mild depletion is a massive biological signal. It screams to the cells, energy is getting low, we need to become more efficient.
Which further activates the AMPK alarm system, driving the body deeper into autophagy without creating the massive cortisol spikes associated with extreme, punishing workouts.
Plus, walking physically engages the muscular pumps in your legs, which is the only way the lymphatic system, the body's sewage network, can actually move cellular waste out of the tissues.
Hippocrates didn't know the word autophagy. He didn't know what the lymphatic system or the MTOR pathway was.
But he observed the undeniable biological result. Humans are designed to move, and they're designed to experience periods of scarcity.
When we align with those natural laws, the body heals. So what does this all mean for you? I want to speak directly to your experience right now.
Think about how often we seek out complex, wildly expensive, highly modern solutions to our health problems.
We buy hundreds of dollars of exotic supplements. We hunt for the latest biohacking gadget. We get lost in the labyrinth of the medical system, searching for a magic bullet.
When the foundational biologically proven answer might literally be, stop the excess consumption, let your digestive system rest, and go for a brisk walk outside.
We have been culturally conditioned to believe that complex chronic diseases require equally complex technological solutions.
This panel is arguing that the most profound healing mechanisms are actually incredibly simple to trigger, but they require discipline, consistency, and a fundamental return to our natural biological state.
And this brings us to the final sweeping mandate of our scenario. It is a direct challenge to the modern medical establishment.
The conclusion is that doctors must evolve.
Instead of just writing prescriptions and sending people to the pharmacy drive-thru to manage their symptoms, doctors must become educators.
They must teach their patients how to navigate a toxic food environment, teach them the biological necessity of movement, and teach them how to consciously activate their own internal healing machinery.
The term used for this is a patient revolution. And the word revolution is appropriate because it is a total transfer of power.
It shifts the locus of control away from the towering hospital systems and the pharmaceutical supply chains and places it firmly back into the hands and the daily choices of the individual.
What a massive, mind-bending journey this deep dive has been. Let's summarize the ground we have covered in this incredible room at Harvard.
We started by looking out the window at the tragic limitations of acute care applied to chronic disease, realizing that just treating symptoms is like endlessly, pointlessly trimming the diseased leaves of a dying tree.
Then we followed Dr. Weston Price to examine the roots, discovering the critical, non-negotiable importance of nutrient-dense diets.
We explored the microscopic architecture of the gut, understanding how processed food acts as a corrosive solvent, creating leaky gut and pulling the trigger on our genetic predispositions.
From there, we zoomed in even further to the absolute cellular level with Dr. Tanaka.
We decoded the biological magic of autophagy, the body's internal recycling plant, and saw how the modern lifestyle of constant consumption actively suppresses this Nobel Prize-winning self-healing mechanism.
And finally, we returned to the ancient, timeless wisdom of Hippocrates, proving that the simple, accessible acts of walking and avoiding excess are not just quaint historical quotes, but profound, biologically sound prescriptions for reactivating human vitality.
It takes us from ancient holistic philosophy to modern Nobel-winning biochemistry, all converging on the exact same truth.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what is the core final takeaway that the listener needs to carry with him today?
If there is one central unifying message to distill from this entire time-bending collision of minds, it is this: trust your body's healing power.
We have to recognize this seductive trap of the symptom management business.
We need to embrace the functional medicine paradigm, which means respecting the delicate architecture of the gut, honoring the root causes of our ailments, and finally, providing the body with the specific environment it requires to clean, repair, and regenerate itself.
Trust your body's healing power. It fundamentally changes how you view yourself. It means you are not a broken, defective machine waiting for a chemical fix.
You are a deeply intelligent, self-healing ecosystem that just needs the right inputs. A shift from being a passive patient to an active participant in your own biology.
So I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to mull over today as you go about your life, something that builds on everything we've explored in that conference room.
We now understand that our bodies possess profound, Nobel Prize-winning self-cleaning mechanisms like autophagy.
And we know that our ancient ancestors intuitively understood the biological power of simple movement and nutrient density thousands of years before the first microscope was ever constructed.
So if we have all that incredible machinery built in, what other miraculous biological superpowers are we currently suppressing with the comforts, conveniences, and artificial environments of modern life?
What else is just sitting dormant inside your cells right now, waiting to be reactivated by a simple return to nature?
That is the ultimate frontier of human health. It opens up an entirely new world of self-discovery for anyone willing to look past the pill bottle and start asking why.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the roots of healing and the incredible mechanisms of the human body. Keep questioning the systems around you, keep learning about your own biology, and maybe, just maybe, go for a walk today.